Welcome back, guys. This is your host, Jalen Jones, with the Huddle Women's Hoops Raw and Unfiltered. Today, we have a very special guest. Her name is Hypatia, and she is the creator behind the Fitted W. If you don't know what that is, don't worry. We are going to jump into that in this episode here. But I just want to give a moment to Hypatia to open up and just introduce yourself to the listeners and tell them a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, hi guys. My name is Hypatia, and I am a designer and filmmaker and photographer based in New York. I recently came out with a book project called The Fitted W, which was chronicling over 50 games from the 2024 WNBA season, where I was documenting fashion from across the league. I went to 12 different states and kind of was interviewing people and asking them about what they were wearing while also documenting it. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. I love your whole concept behind this whole project. Super excited to dive in and let the listeners get to know more about your project, what you worked on, what you published, and all that good stuff. But before we head into the episode, we're just going to do a
Mhm.
quick round of rapid fire questions just to do a little icebreaker before we head into the episode. So
Sounds like a plan.
I got about 7 questions for you, but we're just going to rapidly go through these real quick. All right.
All right.
Sounds good. All right. First things first, describe your style in 3 words.
uh 3 words. I would say definitely masculine. I would say queer, and I would say like relaxed. I like
Love
comfort.
those. Love them. What about WNBA tunnel fits or unrivaled tunnel fits? Who you got?
Uh, I think that's hard. Just because there's more current things to go off of, I'll say unrivaled. But
For sure.
obviously love for the W.
I'm with you on that one. Vintage or designer?
Uh I think that could be vintage designer, but
For
yeah,
sure.
I mean, anything that has to do with sustainability and like comfort is really where I'm at. So
I
both,
hear you.
if
Hey,
possible.
I'll take that. Now, for your photographer side, candid shots or post shots?
Oh, each has its own kind of special place in my heart. I think for this project, I'll say candid, but again, I think each has its own place.
A good post shot is always good, right?
Exactly.
Now, in your opinion, who has the best style in the league?
Uh, Best style in the league. If I could say like top
We'll take
two.
top two.
Ugh, I'm like, even then, that's a cop out. I really hate ranking. I don't say who my favorite player is. I don't say like top
For
legends, like
sure.
nothing like that. So if I had to pick someone that I feel like is really pushing it, I would say Skylar Diggins.
For
But
sure.
I wouldn't necessarily wear everything that she has on. So
Yeah.
I think that's where I would probably say like TP. I think that is probably who I think like Tip. You know what I'm saying?
For
So
sure.
uh,
For sure.
Tiffany Hayes is definitely like icon up there. But then there's just so many. There's just so many people. Like
There is a lot.
I love, yeah, like Chelsea Gray. I love her fits. So there we go.
I'll take those. All right. Now, what's one word to describe the fitted W?
Uh, Archival.
Ooh, perfect. Perfect. I love that one. And lastly, the first word that came to mind when you saw the finished project.
Gay.
I
Yeah, yeah.
love it.
I don't have a copy with me right now, but like if you turn the book to look at the pages, it's like a rainbow. So I think
No
that was kind of
way.
but I was like, yeah, actually this is really gay. I love this.
I
So,
love that. Well, I just feel like the Fitted W is more than a book. So, going into quarter 1, just let's take us back to your idea and why you started this whole project.
Uh, I kind of started this project because I was looking for an archive of women's basketball fashion. That was essentially the crux of everything that I was
Yeah,
working on at the time. And whenever I couldn't find that, I was like, huh, maybe there's a way to do this in a modern sense that
for
still
sure.
does have all of the remnants of the historical aspects of women's basketball as it's come through almost 30 years at this point, at least
Yes.
professionally with the W. And so yeah, that was kind of where I started in some ways. But really, I was trying to look for like a contemporary industry where I could map like Black queer migrations. This is more like the
Okay.
nerdier parts
Yeah.
of the project, because really it started when I was doing research and I was in actual archives and I was trying to work on the screenplay.
Okay.
And as I was like researching the Great Migration along with like the civil rights movement in Harlem, that's kind of what started to have the almost like green flags go
For
off in my head.
sure.
To be like, oh, this is something that could actually be cool to present in some sort of creative way. And then
Yeah.
obviously I couldn't find it, and then I was like, oh well, let me do some let me do
I
some primary
thank
research
you
and
for
figure
putting
it
it
out from there.
together.
So yeah, thank you.
Of course, because it like I said, what you came up with was is absolutely amazing, and I can't wait for the world to see your work. So kudos to you for even taking the time and doing all that you did to put the effort into making this. It's absolutely amazing. What made you choose to develop your photos instead of going the digital, easier, more modern route?
I actually started out doing photography in like a very film archival way. Like
Okay.
I always tell people the first time that I picked up a camera was when my mom, when I was younger, she would give us disposable cameras and we would just run around.
Yes.
And so I think there's that nostalgia aspect that I really appreciate about the texture of film. But when I think about as I got older and really like dove into the practice and the fine arts practice of photography,
Yeah,
film was the only way that I could really go, if especially if I was trying to build something that was archival, that had this kind of built-in
for sure.
like it had this built-in way to honor the moments. And I think that's kind of what film does by being this kind of archival practice, that if you're able to take care of it and know how to like develop it and know how to go to the dark
Yeah,
room and kind of have this practice with image making, I couldn't find, I don't think I would have gotten the same kind of like feel to the
for
project or the
sure.
kind of liveliness to it if I had gone a digital route. But also, just so you know, like going into it's a lot easier to get a film camera into the WNBA games than there is
For
to get a
sure.
digital camera into WNBA games. So I think that also just kind of helps with the whole
Yeah.
thing. So
Now, do you have a special kind of camera, or did you literally go back to like nostalgia days of getting the disposable, or do you have something specific for this?
Um, I'm not gonna say what camera I use, but I did not use
Perfect.
disposable,
Okay,
and that's
good.
just because I like, especially being the type of photographer I am, like I really
Yeah,
do have a very specific way that I am trying to curate an image and trying to
for sure.
compose it, and a lot of it has to do with the technology that you have and the kind of glass that you're shooting on. So I've taken a couple of different cameras with me that I've
Okay.
been able to kind of get in too, but I did have one like major point and shoot that I did that held me down for the entire season, and then once the season was over, like definitely needed to be
Yes.
repaired.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
but but I definitely have this kind of experimental practice in terms of just bringing different types of cameras that can maybe add or take away different parts of
For sure.
what I'm trying to document. So yeah.
I think that's a huge testament to like everything that you've built. Having the cameras that you do have to take into
Mhm.
the games and all that stuff. Absolutely amazing things that you have. So it's okay. Don't tell us
Mm,
the camera and stuff.
that's
You
fine.
keep that to
Yeah.
yourself. That's fine because I we need you to keep producing all these amazing pictures. So yeah, don't tell us about that. But what was the hardest or most challenging part that people don't see behind creating the Fitted W?
Um, I think a big part of it was like not having a lot of backing from the jump. Like I do
Okay.
think there were very serendipitous moments that was like, okay, cool, like that sounds like a great idea. Good luck. And I think that was one part of it. But I think the part that was the most, or I guess the moment that I can think of that was like, oh, this is actually difficult, was kind of keeping up with the travel schedule without having that kind
For
of major
sure.
backing. So that,
Yeah.
um, and weather. Like I remember there was this one game, it was back to back. It was LA in New York, and then the very next one was in Atlanta. So I'm in New York for the Pride game. I think that was the Pride game. They played twice back to back, but like anyway, so it was the Pride game, and then the
Yeah.
meeting next day they're supposed to be in Atlanta. I get to the airport early after the game. I immediately go from the game to the airport, and I'm waiting in the airport. My flight is getting delayed and delayed for like 4 hours.
No.
Keeps getting delayed, and I'm looking at the time. I'm like, they play tomorrow at 2 p.m. Like I actually
Oh my
don't know
gosh.
how this is gonna work. So then I crazily called my roommate up and was like, "Hey, what are you doing tonight?" And they were like, "Actually, I'm shooting this event." They're also photographers. So like, "Oh, I'm shooting this event."
Okay.
I was like, "Cool. Does it end around midnight? And would you do a 12-hour drive with me to Atlanta
For
because
sure.
I need to get to that city?" And after a lot of promises and a lot of being cool, I will do this. Love that. I ended up
Yes.
just renting a car, and then we did a 12-hour drive. Like, when I tell you, we parked the car, and as soon as I walked in and looked over like the railing in the Atlanta stadium, they were literally tipping off. And that's
No
that. Like, it was
way.
literally, when I tell you, that was like one of the most kind of like heart pounding moments of like, it was like maybe game 12 or 13.
Yeah,
It was pretty early, so it was like, if I miss this, then it's like it's kind of done.
I hear
So
you. Shout out to
so
Rumi.
yeah, no, exactly. So I think that was one of the like more difficult parts, was just trying to keep up with the travel, because it was
Yeah,
so many different games in so many different places. But it was fun. It was definitely
yeah.
fun.
Now, will you tell our listeners again, because I've done my thorough research on everything that you had to do to create this project, but let our listeners know how many games, how many cities, how many photos you had to take. Just give us the whole rundown of all of that insight.
Yeah, I mean, so I traveled to all 12 cities that had a WNBA team at the time. This was in
Okay.
2024. I was based in New York, and also because New York is the only city that is like a fashion capital that
For
also had a
sure.
WNBA team. That's where I based the project around. So I followed the New York Liberty as they went to every single game across their season. And because I committed to all of them, and then they ended up going all the way to the championship, I think it
Yes.
comes out to being like 51 games or
Oh
something like
my
that.
gosh.
I don't know the specific number, I'm going to be honest with you.
Okay.
But it's like 51, 52, something like that. But I went to every single one. So if they were in Indiana, I was in Indiana. If they were in
Yes.
Seattle, I was in Seattle. So that's kind of at least for the travel portion of it. I had over at the end of this, because I was shooting on film, like over like 1,200 photos that I
Oh
ended
my
up
gosh.
having at the end. And like
Yeah.
maybe a third or less of that is actually in the final book portion of it, just because of
Okay.
like the book is already like over 300 pages. I was like, hey guys,
I was gonna
I
ask.
need, yeah,
Wow.
I didn't want to give everyone like a big kind of dictionary. So I was like, okay,
For
let me try to
sure.
find this. Um, but yeah, that was kind of it. The games that I went to, the kind of praxis behind it. I don't know if you asked another question or another part of that.
No.
Um,
Nope.
but yeah, that was essentially it. And because the New York Liberty ended up winning the championship, it extended it out beyond 40 games, obviously.
Yes.
But then the project ended up documenting, all the people, or
That
people
is
of
such
game that was leading up to a championship. So, and New York's first. So.
like how did you ever imagine that you would be documenting New York's first championship? Like was there ever a point in your mind where you're like, you know what, I might have started something and if they win it this year, this is just gonna be an action a plus on top of what I'm doing. Was that ever a thought to you?
When I was very early in the kind of like pitching stages and talking to some of my friends that are kind of been in the sports and film ecosystem a little bit, a lot of them were
Yeah.
like, "New York never takes it. Like, sure you could do it and like just make it more about the W. Like New York never takes it."
Oh
And
my
so I think I was kind of
gosh.
just like, okay, like I wasn't necessarily too wrapped up in like who was gonna win. I was more
For
wrapped up in the
sure.
project. But looking back on it, especially being from San Antonio, like I feel like most of my formative years were around the time where San Antonio, like the men's side, was taking so many championship games
Yes.
or so many championships. It was like San Antonio versus LeBron or San Antonio
For
versus Kobe
sure.
back to back. I do think that there was something special, like that you could tell from the way that the team was working together. That like
For sure.
I definitely like halfway through was like, no, actually, I think they might take it, but I'm not gonna jinx anything. I'm gonna wait,
Yeah.
and I don't think it hit me until the confetti started falling, and I was like, oh yeah, wow, that actually worked. Cool.
Now you saved some of that confetti, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, there's a portion of the book that is like mixed media. So like I did scan in a lot of the kind of things that I have been able to collect through the process of it,
Okay.
and able to collage in that way. So yeah, there is some confetti in the book.
I cannot wait to get my hands on this book. Oh my goodness. And then the last question in quarter one is before the Fitted W became what it is today, what was the very first moment you realized this was bigger than just photos?
I think like for me it always was, and I think that is kind of like what's been hard to translate a little bit,
For
because
sure.
a lot of this did come from a like very deep like educational academic praxis
Yeah.
of like trying to essentially like map hyperlocal politics through like queer migration patterns.
Yeah.
Um, that was always the practice of what I was looking at. So then when you extrapolate that to be like fashion, WNBA across the nation, it's like, how do you connect those dots?
For
And it's very
sure.
easy for me, but I think that's what, as I was kind of going through the book making process, I knew that I wasn't just going to give everyone a picture book. Like that was
For
something that was
sure.
antithetical to like who I am as a person. So as I was kind of writing the opening essay and doing more of the kind of academic research writing at the back of the book,
Yeah.
I started to kind of be able to use the examples of what I had photographed to kind of highlight some of the stuff I was talking about. So that was really like nice. And I think it's very useful for people who are kind of thinking of this as like, oh, cool, lookbook, instead of a like more like, I hate to say like more of a textbook in
For
some
sure.
ways. But yeah,
Now,
so it was always bigger than photos for me.
for sure. Now, is it more, will we find like educational pieces in here in the book of any sort, or is it just like, what's the feel of the
Um,
context?
so the beginning part is kind of just introducing them essentially to me, right? Like
Okay.
to me, my work, how I got into this a little bit, and then you get the photos, and then in the back of the book, you kind of get a little bit more of looking at how the W has used fashion as advocacy, as like an on
Okay.
route to be able to advocate for either better like pay, better payment, better
Yes,
rights, protecting queer or trans youth, like things like that,
for sure.
protecting against police violence. So that's kind of more what I try to highlight towards the end of the book, is that like, yes,
Perfect.
this is about fashion, but more so how you fashion a movement is really what this is actually showing. It's showing that like, even though sports is a space that I feel like people try to keep very apolitical, that it
For
has been
sure.
political, and especially in the WNBA, that there is almost like a pillar, a hidden pillar,
Yes,
the players wanting to be able to advocate and do a lot of good work that helps push their league to be at the forefront of a lot of like women and queer rights,
for
just
sure.
in the labor movement in general. But then beyond that, that they're doing that work for women's sports, and how this is kind of like the beginning brick to the wall that they're eventually building,
Yeah,
that's to protect all of the people who, are a part of these identities of this league that is 80%, of color.
exactly.
I don't want to say majority queer because we're never gonna get a number, but that has
For
a lot of protections for queer and trans individuals. So
sure. I think it's so important that these topics are talked about, whether in media, in books, or whatever it is. So I think the narrative that you took is super important for people to understand about the other sides of the W, more than just a sport. Fashion, queerness,
for
rights,
sure.
all that is super important in the WNBA, because the women aren't protected like all these, like the men are in other sports and things like that,
Mhm.
and they don't get the praise and the attention that they need to half the time. So I think your project is really a stepping stone into the eyes of what the W really is. So, um, you focused a lot on fashion, especially in the New York Liberty. Why was it so important for you to tell the story through the fans' point of view, not the players?
I wouldn't necessarily say that's the truth, because there are some
Okay.
players that I did photograph in there,
Okay.
but it was really more about trying to capture this community and this ecosystem
For
of
sure.
the WNBA, and how it just feels. I think you can, by looking through it and looking at the images, you can see kind of the energy, the joy, and a lot of the just like openness to a lot of interactions. Like I really think
Yeah.
about this book as more of a testament to the community of the fans, because if they hadn't have been open and like willing to let me take this photo for
For
this
sure.
project, it wouldn't exist. And to say that I was able to go to all of the cities at the time that had a WNBA team, and everyone, like I was able to find people who were
Yeah.
willing to do this. I think that also just is another, like, it's another added aspect to just how this league really has this feel of inclusivity and this
For
feel of like
sure.
being able to be included in some way, and how like it really is collaborative. Like this when I
Yes.
think about this project, this feels purely collaborative because of the idea of people being able to show up as who they are and then be photographed. Like
Right.
I wasn't telling people to meet me in certain places and wear certain things. Like it was
For
purely a
sure.
collaborative effort in terms of just documenting what their expression was and then being able to honor it through the book and things like that.
I love that.
Um, so yeah, I think it's just important to tell the stories of places that aren't necessarily in the spotlight. And in 2024, there was a little bit of, I would say like flashlights,
Yeah,
around the W, but it hadn't kind of gotten the big major
for
spotlight that it has
sure.
now. And I think also that is a great part of it because I really was able to get this kind of intergenerational moment of the
Yes.
WNBA where it's like you have OGs who have, been season ticket
Yeah,
holders since the beginning, and then you have new fans and you have everyone in between, including players, including stylists, including people who are like making shoes for players and things like that. So it really is just a testament to what has been built for women's
for
basketball,
sure.
you know.
For sure. Now, when you were going to these cities and you were going, documenting, taking the pictures, were the fans really open to being part of your project?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, like I was like I can count maybe on one hand how many times someone told me no. And it was usually
Okay.
because they were like running somewhere. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't because they were like, "What are you doing?" It was very much just
Yeah,
like I'm catching them at a bad moment and it's just like, "Yeah, I can't do that. Sorry." So yeah, like I definitely think that a lot of people were very open to at least like a random person coming up to them being like, "Hey, I'm working on this project. Can I take your photo?
yeah.
I like what you're and things like that." So
I love that because if I were in New York and I saw you out there, or if you would have came up to me, I'd be like, hell yeah, please take a
and
picture of me. I would love to be part of your project. So I think that's so
I,
cool that you opened it up to complete strangers just to document
yeah,
this time. I,
yeah,
I
I
think that's
think
so cool.
I think there's also something about like fashion that kind of like strokes the ego a little bit. Like if
Yeah.
someone's like, "Oh, I like what you have on," it's like, "I really got that on."
Yeah.
Like, go ahead, document it.
Right.
So I think that part also kind of made it a little bit easy to have that at least initial interaction of like, "Yo, what you're wearing is fire. Like,
For
can I take this
sure.
photo? I'm working on this."
Love that so much. Do you feel like the WNBA fashion is more community driven than athlete driven compared to other leagues?
Um, I don't necessarily know what you mean by community driven versus athlete driven. I think it's
Uh,
just an ecosystem. I think it like, and I don't know if like
that's
you
that's
wanted
pretty much the word. I should have used that word instead of community. Yeah, but basically ecosystem. That you're
no,
exactly
yeah,
right.
I think it plays off of both of it, right? Like if there's a really big trend, then you'll probably see like a player capitalizing off of that in some way.
For
Or
sure.
if there's like something that's fire that a player is wearing, you'll probably see it start to be trending the other way. So I do think it is this kind of like symbiotic relationship where it's the process of building culture
For
more
sure.
than it is like this kind of like give or take situation.
Yeah.
It's just like these are the rough drafts, and as you kind of go, it refines itself, and then you get kind of what it means to be a part of the W, which is just like being fly and
Yeah,
fitted.
exactly. Literally. And I only asked that because my fashion sense is probably not the greatest. I'm a sporty girl at heart. I'm Nike everything, but I just wanted to know, like, from your point of view, like, did a lot of people trend more on like trends, or did a lot of people wear jerseys with a certain person on it? I guess that was
You
more so the
know,
question I was getting at.
yeah. No, that's a great distinction. And like I would kind of say it was even. Like I don't
Okay.
necessarily think that at least for me, whenever I was looking around, I was trying to get a balance. Like I was trying to get some of those like archival pieces where it's like,
For
oh, that's
sure.
like that's like a like something that's like an OG jersey versus
Okay.
like something that is a little bit newer. But like I was open to either one. But then also if someone was just wearing something that was like fly and they're at the game, I
Yeah.
was like, I can grab that. So I think there was definitely a balance. In the very first game that I went to, I remember these two friends. I was asking them about like, oh, what was your inspiration for today? And they were like, usually whenever we come to the games, we like have these two pillars, like it's either fashion or fangirl. And like fangirl is
Okay.
definitely like wearing more logos, wearing more team spirit, and then the
Yeah.
fashion like, no, we're here to stunt. And I love that that was kind of the way that they
Yes.
had this from, and that they decided beforehand, like, okay, we're gonna do more fangirl or fashion.
Yes.
but I do think like exactly what you're talking about. I think there is this balance of where how people are able to just express themselves, whether that is their love for a player,
Yeah,
love for a league, love for a team, or just like their love for expressing themselves in the space. Like I think
for
there
sure.
is this like there's this marriage with sports and streetwear and like high that's kind of going a little bit more towards where we're seeing high fashion and couture
For
go with like
sure.
them kind of pulling in like more ASAP Rocky and Pharrell and other people to
Exactly.
kind of have this influence over fashion. So I feel like it goes together, and it's really hard to delineate which is more important or which was more
Yeah.
present because they work together to create the space.
I completely understand what you're coming from in that point. I completely would understand how it's hard to really say what people are wearing more than the other because it's such a huge market where you're seeing a little bit of everything at this point.
Exactly.
So I
Exactly.
can there's a certain energy at women's basketball games that feels different. You touched on that just a little bit ago. You mentioned something about that. How would you describe that culture to someone who's never experienced it before?
Usually when people are like new to sports or new to kind of like one, I don't know, I feel like I tried to bring an even group of people as I was going, of like people who were like really into sports and people who were just
Yeah.
kind of like, what should I wear? I've never been to a game. But usually I just am kind of like, it's a little party. Like it's gonna
Yeah.
be high energy, but it's gonna be like not it's gonna be competitive, but most of the people there aren't like when I think about men's sports, it's a lot of kind of like I don't want to say aggression because maybe that's not the right word, but it is very
Kinda.
like like it touches on it, but it's kind of like everyone has this like this almost like ferociousness to their love or
Yeah.
their fandom for a thing. Whereas like I don't know, it's interesting because like if you're at like a New York Liberty game, for instance, like there's one person who's just like the defector and who's like booing 100%. Like everyone's kind of looking at them like, this is a like
Yeah.
WNBA game, right? Like we don't necessarily do that here. But
Right.
to say that it has that kind of like feel where whenever I was asking people like who they were rooting for, most of them were like, I'm just rooting for a good game of basketball, or like I'm rooting for women,
Yeah.
I'm rooting for everyone gay. Like and so I think there is that kind of generalization of where people fall in love with players and fall in love with
Yeah.
storylines a little bit quicker than they do identify with like with the teams or the branding that
For
way.
sure.
So yeah, I would just say like it's definitely a party. It's a party atmosphere. It's somewhere you can
Yes.
yell. It's somewhere you can like let off steam, and that there will be like plenty of nice and amazing things to witness. So that's usually how I soft pitch it. Um, and then yeah, that's usually how I soft pitch it. I
I
have
think
another
that's perfect because
yeah,
I completely agree with what you said. It's like a huge party. It's just a lot of good vibes, a lot of love in the atmosphere that you rarely find any bad atmospheres of basketball games. Like you said, there might be a one or two or 10 people who are booing in the crowd, but 9 times out of 10, when you go to a WNBA game, it's going to be good vibes the whole entire time, whether you're going
for
for
sure.
a specific team or you're just there to catch a vibe. It's
Exactly,
honestly it's a great time.
for
Did you
sure.
see any differences in style from city to city? What separates New York from some city like LA or Atlanta?
I think every city definitely has its own kind of like fashion sense in that way. I think when I was doing this was 2024, so this might be a little outdated, but I do think that players have a really big kind of like influence on the type of crowd that is drawn to it. I
For
think New
sure.
York has a lot of loyalists, so it's kind of like you're gonna get the super fans and you're gonna get people who like just got off of a
Yeah.
photo shoot get stylists. You're gonna get all types of different people, which is the beautiful part of New York in that way, and why it was kind of not necessarily easier, but like it really is this epicenter of people expressing themselves
For
and like
sure.
having the freedom to do that versus like a place that honestly like Indiana, I feel like Indianapolis was more very sports focused. Like there were a lot of
I
jerseys,
believe it.
a lot of shirts that like had players' faces on it, things like that. But then like when you look at a Chicago, it was like I hate to say it like this, but it kind of felt like Baddie Central. Like it was kind of like like
Yeah,
and I say that to say like Barbie, what I'm saying? Like once
for
Angel
sure.
Reese came, very much like this high femme, like
Yes.
kind like influx of fans that definitely like you can see the makeup almost of the fandom shifting and
Yeah,
changing as people are trying to be a part of it. So I'd be interested to see, what that looks like compared to, Golden State now,
for
or like even
sure.
whenever I was in Connecticut, it was a lot of kind of like vintage, women's basketball things. So I think each city and each place has its own kind of identity in itself
For
for
sure.
basketball, and then the city itself has a higher like fashion in general that is like in its own way looking to create some sort of culture that way. And then yeah, I would just say it's all different. When I was ranking them, I definitely think it was like New York, Chicago, and then Vegas, just because I think Vegas has this kind of like
Ooh.
it has this influx of people that are coming in from everywhere, and so it does
Okay.
kind of become epicenter of fashion in a way that like other places that are not necessarily as like touristy
For
would
sure.
get.
Now, for in the queer sense, I know Atlanta is a really big
Mm.
scene. Did you
Yeah.
see more so of that fashion or that sense if you went to Atlanta? Did you see more
Yeah,
so
yeah.
queerness there?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm from the South. I'm from Texas, so I do think that like there was definitely an influence, and I also think it just
Yeah.
had kind of this like Southern flair. Like when I think about one of my favorite photos I took in Atlanta, there's this woman who she'd been a season ticket holder since the very first game, and
Yes.
she had this big chain on that said ATL Ho, and she wears it to
Oh,
every game. It's like I wear this to every game, and lo and behold, the next game that I went to, she was sitting right
yeah,
there in the same spot and she had it on. And so I think there is kind of that like more southern flair to it
for
that like
sure.
is added obviously because it's there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I there was not a place where I didn't see someone who was queer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And
for
so
sure.
wait,
I love hearing like these backstories, like your favorite photo or your favorite moment, just because I'm trying to be in the moment with you. Like, think about, like, dang, if I were there at that time, like, what would I be saying, or like, what would I be trying to document or archive?
Mhm.
Just trying to put myself in your shoes, because I think what you did going to these places is amazing, just to be able to travel around and document and see different
Mhm.
people, different places, different fashion all the way around. I think that is
Yeah.
such a cool thing that you did. But if you had
Thank
to be honest, after traveling and documenting fashion in 12 cities, what city has the best culture in the sense of fashion right now?
It's gonna be outdated. This was 2024, so I really can't speak to which one I think had the best, like, or which one is like best right now.
Yeah,
I think for me, whenever I was documenting, I think it was just easier or like that excitement was kind of easier for me to get when I was in New York because that's where I'd lived for, 5 years plus,
for
and I was able
sure.
to like see people that I'd seen before or like people that were kind of my friends that I was like, oh, I didn't even know you watched basketball and things like that. So
Yeah.
I'll just say New York because I think, it is a fashion capital and it is kind of always on the edge of something.
Yes.
Um, but I am really excited to see how everything shakes out because I do think LA was like a sleeper. I do think LA like had a lot potential. When I did this, they were not necessarily highly ranked in terms of
Yeah,
like their record. But I do think as people get more interested into the sport, I definitely think there'll be influxes of
for
other
sure.
people trying to express themselves, and the fashion and the style will just like change as the teams kind of evolve.
Now that we're getting two more teams, we're getting Portland Fire and the Toronto Tempo. Do you plan on going to those cities to document anything when they do debut in their inaugural season?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely planning on sticking to New York for right now, but
Okay,
I'm interested in seeing kind of how everything develops and definitely trying to do a little mini tour of like all the cities that I haven't been to yet.
for sure.
So that is on the list, at least for Toronto since it's like right here.
Sounds good. Now, going into quarter four, we just have a few more questions. Just basically, these questions are just about impact and what we can maybe see what's coming next if there's anything going on. So, you
Hmm.
had a special opportunity to be featured in Vogue magazine.
Hmm.
What did that recognition do for you in that moment and even still right now?
Definitely whenever. I literally remember once the article went live, I definitely took a photo that was kind of like that LeBron James, like, I can't believe this is my life kind of moment. Just to, be a little silly, but I think it was also kind of just a testament to like whenever you're doing something that doesn't necessarily have a lot of backing, and when you're able to get that
Yes.
first press hit,
Yeah.
that is something that is as big as Vogue. And it is like as big as and it's like happening in a big moment or like meeting a moment where this was before game 4 in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like the champion could be crowned tonight or in a couple of days when we go back to New
Yeah.
York. Go back to New York. So I think it was more about meeting the moment that meant more to me. And I think as, I talk to people about it and as I, continue to have relationships, kind of in the press world and the
For
PR
sure.
world, I definitely think it's helpful that like that was kind of the first press hit the first thing that I've ever written for any type of outlet.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think it just means that like this was a good idea from the jump. I think that was kind of like
For
that. I
sure.
think that hit me before like the New York Liberty could potentially win this, and I could have potentially like documented. I was like, no,
Yes.
bro, I'm in Vogue.
Like literally, literally, I
Yeah,
love that. Do you still
yeah.
have that article? Like, is there somewhere that listeners can go and find it? Is it still up anywhere? Do you have that?
Yeah, yeah, it's still up. If you
Okay.
go to like my profile, you can see it. If you just search like my name in Vogue, it'll come
Okay.
up. And you can read it. I was thinking about for a little while in a couple of my other proofs. I had like a copy of that essay in the beginning
Yeah,
part, but then I was like, let me just actually write a separate one because I
for
think
sure.
that that can live as where it is, and I have more to say if that means
Yes.
anything. It's a nice introduction though to why the project came about and why I was so like meticulous about wanting to document the space.
Yes. Now, you archived a moment in women's basketball history, especially the Liberty's first championship. What does that mean to you personally?
I think again, like I think it just reaffirms that like this was a good idea. I think that's what it
Yes.
means. It kind of gives me that little pat on the back of like, okay, cool. Like this archival project is actually archival. Like that there
Yes.
is a sense of history that is recognizable from for other people beyond just people who might have been tangentially related to the project. Like all of New York was
Yes.
obsessed with the fact that they had their first championship, and so being able to just document that for people, who weren't necessarily tapped in, or even people who were tapped in but
Yeah.
weren't necessarily in other places, it just means that like I did my job as a photographer
Literally.
and to,
Literally.
to accomplish the goal. So that's what it means. But it is huge. Like I don't mean to discount the New York Liberties like process or even
Yeah.
just like being able to witness all of that because it was really a big season and you could kind of feel the energy from the very first game.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it was just nice to be able to reconnect with basketball in such a big monumental way.
Yes. Now, if someone picks up the fitted W 10 years from now, what do you want them to feel?
Probably that like they don't have to do this, not like it exists. But no, I think I would want them to be able to look at it and see, or just at least feel like this is a good starting point for being introduced to women's basketball or just style in the space.
Yeah.
Or even, especially if they are queer, like being able to look at something that feels like a time capsule of some sort of queer expression and be like, oh, I see
Yes.
myself. So I think really harping on this idea of like this future nostalgia, shout out to Dua Lipa,
Yes.
but like this idea of like future nostalgia that like feels almost like it is in the past but is also like predicting things that will happen in the future because
For
as you know,
sure.
style fashion is cyclical.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Gosh. Now, when you were talking about in some of your videos on your social media, you were just talking about how, if I don't quote me, but just in a sense of you wanted to create this because instead of going to find all these different things that you put together into this project, going different places and finding all of these, you wanted people to just find everything in one spot. You just put everything into this project, past, present, future. And I think that's really
Mhm.
huge. So when people go to do research on the WNBA and past things, that they can literally just pick up your book and learn so much from everything that you put into it. I think that's super important for going forward, even in the future. just to know that there's people like you who really take the time to put these things together for a certain reason and a purpose. And I think that's why I'm so huge on like really praising you for this project, because I think the time that you put into it and the effort that you put into it and the education behind it is really important for many people, all of us to see, honestly.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course. So, if there's anything, what's next for you? Are we getting a fitted W volume 2 or something completely different?
I So the project was actually originally called Fitted WNBA,
Okay.
and I changed it to be Fitted Women's Basketball because I essentially was thinking about the history of women's basketball globally and even like on a national level, and was kind
For
of like
sure.
there's more to it than just the WNBA. So now the project is kind of under, this is almost like the first publication under the project, which is a women's basketball fashion archive.
Okay.
And so I'm hoping to continue to archive women's basketball fashion wherever that exists and
Yes.
whoever exists in these communities, because even though
For
this one
sure.
is the most kind of highly known one in the US. Like there are so many other places and pockets of women's
Yeah.
basketball culture that is doing just as much work, if not more, for wherever they're at. And so
Yes.
that's really kind of what the focus has not necessarily shifted to, but just expanded. I've kind of zoomed
Okay.
out a little bit. At least for right now, I'm planning on doing a print publication. It'll probably be something that looks more like a magazine,
Okay.
that will be kind of this almost tribute to kind of the New York women's basketball scene and kind of the people that you don't necessarily always have the visibility to know that like this is
Yeah.
someone who is holding such a big part of the community,
For sure.
um or even being able to contribute in like small ways or things like that. But that's the next portion of what I'm going to do, and trying to kind of expand this idea of what an archive means, understanding that like my photos are not a complete archive or like a
For
complete
sure.
view of what all of the like cultural impacts of women's basketball is
Yeah.
in New York or space in general. So yeah, so the next one is just kind of thinking about trying to interview people a little bit more, and get a little bit more experimental, do a little bit more design work. I don't have to do a lot of writing.
For
I can do
sure.
photos away, and kind of show off my like studio prowess a little bit more instead of my
Good.
street photography.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm just excited all around to be able to be in print media, and be able to be pioneering something in this kind of very specific way.
Yes. I am like, please continue to do projects because I am so such a supporter behind your movements. I think like I sound like a broken record, but I do think
Okay.
everything that you're doing is with such purpose and with such grace and with so much emotion behind it that you're just gonna get so many supporters off of this because it's such an important thing in the women's basketball space, but just in this space in general. I think it's so important and it's fire. I cannot
Thanks.
stop saying that enough. It's so
I
fire.
appreciate it.
Lastly, on your site, you have an open call form. Can you explain to our listeners what that is more in depth?
Yeah, very much like whenever I was thinking about the fitted W, and I was kind of like, I could just stay in New York and I could not do something that's as insane as it is. Um, but I, being especially from Texas, I kind of knew that there was more out there, that like New
For
York
sure.
is not the center of the world. And that's no shade at all to any New Yorkers who feel that way. But I really wanted to be able to make it be something that was cohesive. And also,
Yeah.
and so I have the open call on the website because I know that my purview and like my community and my connections are not
Yeah.
the end of where this community impact exists. And so that's why I kind of have this open call, just be like, if you're interested and you feel like you have something that's either like a collection of something that can speak to your affinity for New York basketball, or
For
some sort
sure.
of cover some sort of historical part of New York's women's basketball scene, like come talk to me. I'm definitely open to having a lot of communication, or a lot of just communications and just open conversations about
Yeah.
this topic, from whoever wants to talk about it. So,
Love that. Well, that really wraps up the 4 quarters of this episode. Thank you so much, Hypatia, for joining us today. Your
of
story is
course,
absolutely amazing. Your project is amazing. And I really want this to get out and people to really understand your project for what it is and get their hands on a copy themselves, because I think
Thank you.
after everything we've talked about in this episode today, I'm sure there's people out there who's going to want to get their hands on this book. So, first off, where can our listeners find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find the project at Fitted WBB, like women's basketball. And that's on every platform. I will say I probably use Instagram and TikTok a little bit more than the other ones.
Okay.
So if you really want to follow it along, those are probably your best your best bet.
Okay.
And then the website that kind of houses the project is called a women's basketball fashion archive.com. And so that's where you can learn more about me, learn more about the project, kind of see what we have coming up a little bit, and purchase a copy.
Perfect. Well, guys, that is the end of our episode today with the Huddle Women's Hoops Raw and Unfiltered. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you really enjoyed this episode. We hope that you, first and foremost, please go and follow Hypatia on her social medias. Please go and check out the website. Please purchase a copy. She worked so hard on this project. Let's just show her some love and really pour back into her as she poured into us, making this project for the whole world to see. So, again, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Join us again next week for our next episode. Until then, huddle up and have a great day.